local education authorities and so on, like the Faulkes Project, which enables our schools to interact with, for example, telescopes in Australia, Palmer and so on. Now, that costs a lot of money. It costs you, I think, something of the order of a couple of £100 an hour to do that. It's probably well worth doing it. You can also buy control programs that will enable you to control the telescope locally. Well, Andrew's developed the code for this telescope controller. It's an ongoing project, but it works at the moment, that enables from a computer over a network, and we've tested it over wireless networks, for example, so you don't need any connection whatsoever between your computer that's doing the controlling and any physical connection, and the telescope is being controlled. Andrew will tell you more about this, but the exciting thing that I see in this is that it is right now possible for a decent amateur astronomer who has an internet connection in, let us say, the United Kingdom, to team up with a school in somewhere like Australia or Canada. It's night time here, it's daytime there, and the people in that school will be able to control the telescope of the person here in the United Kingdom. And that applies to anywhere in the world, as long as you've got a school site that is in daytime and a collaborating astronomer that is on the dark side of the Earth. That school will be able to have a one-to-one collaboration with that person. Now, I see this as a very, very exciting possibility. We've tested it. Andrew will show you something about this. I alluded to it in my introductory talk last night. We've already had somebody in Canada controlling that telescope there, and we have the results from that. We know that it works. Andrew has got further plans for this, which he will no doubt tell you about, and that will depend on further, basically, cooperation between people who might be prepared to put their telescopes out and online, and allow people to, if you like, dial into a system and find out what scope is available, and then to log on to it and get allocated a certain amount of time to use it. Whether that will ever take off, technically it's feasible. Whether it will ever take off will be for the future to see. But right now with us is Andrew's NTC network telescope control. So Andrew's going to give a little talk about it and to demonstrate it to you.
Okay, the simple idea is usually now when you're setting your telescope up, inevitably it's going to be cold. It's going to be in the middle of the winter and it's going to be freezing cold, but the sky is beautiful. So, I mean, I've been suggesting it can be as much as 1.5 hours setting up everything outside. And by the time you've done that, you'll probably be freezing already. And so once you start looking at the sky, you start shivering. So, the alternative is if you have a computer in your house, theoretically anyway, with a network connection. So, simply, under the simplest circumstance, you could have 2 network cards and a crossover cable connected between in the house to your observatory outside, and you have every possibility of controlling the telescope. And using fast Ethernet or even slow Ethernet, you'd be able to pipe through, stream the video through an alternative way, using net beating or something like that. But in the future, NTC will do video as well, and we'll be compressing on the fly. So it means that you'll be able to send large bandwidth of video over a slow connection, which means hopefully in real time you'll be able to download realistic data that you can actually analyse using programs like Registax and so on. But simply, the way it works locally, you have a telescope connected to a laptop, which can even be a 486. The network will go to your computer in the house, or in, say, in the observatory or anywhere, and you'll be running. The laptop will be running NTC server, which is like, because the program comes in 2 halves. You'd have NTC server connected to the telescope, and you'd have the NTC client running as remotely on your network. And again, on the in the internet, you have a similar system, you have the NTC server running on the telescope, you have the internet, and at the other end, again, you have your client running. And like I said, in the future, we'll have video as well, but it is still possible to use video. Anyway. This is the program at the moment. At the moment, it's connected locally, because you'll be able to use the server locally on its own. And this part of the program isn't quite ready yet, but it just gives you an indication as to what's possible. You'll be able to create your own catalogue, for example, where you could add your favourites, like favourites in Internet Explorer. You'll be able to mark craters on the moon and sunspots. Hopefully our server will be able to download the latest information, like what sunspots are and so on. The program should be able to take you to parts of the moon or the sun. And also the planets, the red indicator would mean that the planet is now below the horizon, and it's green, it's above. But all this information is coming from the server, not the client. It's coming from the computer that's connected to the telescope. So like when you log on different places, you might find different situations. But anyway, this is the control. Now, the first version, we had slight problems with it, with the code, because the limitations of Delphi, and the sense that it does things doesn't do things it should do. And it made it problematic for us, and we took the code out and completely changed the way it works. And now it's a little bit better. Now, the way it worked before is it just did freehand slewing, which meant that you could hold down the button, move the telescope, let go of the button, and the telescope stops. Now the problem with that would be is if the telescope is moving and the cable automatically becomes, or the cable gets disconnected from the telescope, the problem would be that the telescope would just keep moving until it was told to stop, and if it can't be told to stop, it would just keep going and going and going. And the Meade telescopes, they don't have this kind of fail-safe built in. Anyway, can you see that all right? Can we have some light in the subject, please, Steve? Yeah, I think we're looking at you at the moment. Okay.
Whoa.
That's all right.
Okay, so instead of freehand slewing, what we're doing is you basically, because inevitably what we'll normally be looking through something like this, you'll be looking through a camera window. So for freehand slewing, it's not necessary, because you won't be by the telescope, so you won't be the one who's aligning it. So there's no much point in freehand slewing anyway. So what happens is, in the search panel, you basically specify the dimensions of the camera. Now this is done at the server, not at the client. So you say, for example, the camera is 340 pixels wide, it's 240 pixels high, and you then say so many arc seconds per pixel, which just simply tells NTC server how far to move the camera in order to move by a width of the camera. And you can also specify how much of the camera you want to overlap, and we say 80%. So, I mean, we haven't quite tuned it perfectly, but I click on one of the buttons. See it move. Now, the AutoStar takes a long time to respond when it's finished slewing, whereas the LX200 is a very fast telescope. It's nice. It just takes about 2 or 3 seconds. And of course, you can see the controls are grayed out, and when they hear it beep and they come back. That's just the telescope simply telling my program that it's finished slewing. It's a bit pointless to keep slewing. You have to wait for it to stop. Anyway, so that's the one way of doing it, by the width of the window or the height of the window. But you can also specify how many degrees, minutes and seconds you want to move. Now the advantage with this system, it means that we don't actually tell it to move and tell it to stop. We just simply calculate the offset from where it is now to where we want it to go and tell it to go to. So it'll just go to and so on. Now the advantage of that is that most of these telescopes have fail-safe systems, so if it knows that you're telling it to go to below the horizon or too far above or below horizon, it'll just tell you, and it won't move. So in all, it makes it much safer for the guy who's got his expensive telescope set up. Now the search function here is to I won't demonstrate it now because I haven't fully tested it. But theoretically, what it is, when you line the telescope up, you've got your object centered in the center of the eyepiece. You take the eyepiece out and put the camera in. Inevitably, the camera will not be looking at the same point because the width of the chip in the camera is much less than the eyepiece. So what you find is that you've got to try and find this object. So just moving around in the dark, trying to find it, it's like, it's no good because you never know where you are. So what this function does is you simply click on out, and what it will do is go down, and each time you go either go clockwise or anti-clockwise around the square that you come out of, and you just keep going round, out, until you find your object. So that's one way of doing that. And you can also go in as well, back in case you missed it. But the whole point of these controls here is just to tell you what the dimensions of the camera are. So what you normally find is you can just make sure that you're not going too far right and you've missed it and so on. Anyway, well, that's as far as we've got it now. We're going to do video, which means streaming live over the internet. We're also going to have, I intend to have a system where it works a bit like a bulletin board. Do you remember the old bulletin boards in the 80s, before the internet? You would log on to a bulletin board, you would download your mail and so on. Well, a server will act just like a bulletin board, and you'd have facilities, because obviously there may be many people waiting to use the telescope. So you will be logged onto the bulletin board or onto the server, and you'll be basically, you can talk to each other. You have a facility where you can create your own catalogues, you can store your own images, and you'll be able to share your information. Just so while you're waiting, you're not just simply waiting and not doing anything. And the main thing I want to do though is, like Steve mentioned, we intend to have a server that will allow, once a person has a telescope, he would set it up, connect it up, it would just click on a button, and his telescope or her telescope will be added to the list of on the server. It'll be added to the list of telescopes. Now, at the other end, a school, for example, would log onto the client and then click on the button, and up comes a list of all the telescopes that are available around the world. I do intend to make it possible for someone to charge for telescope time as well, because that would encourage people to do this. But the most important thing is to make it safe as possible for the telescope, because that is important, and it would mean people feel more confident in using this software. So essentially, this version hasn't actually been released yet. It's actually still being tested. I haven't actually fully tested the search function yet. I mean, theoretically it should work, but that's about it really. So that's it.
Perhaps instead of charging for time, maybe you should be able to accumulate work units that your scope's been used for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So right, everybody else has used my telescope for the last 10 hours. I need some telescope time for my own. Who's going to let me have access to their system as well and just be able to charge in a monetary value for it?
You mean you want to use it as well?
Yeah, I mean if I've got this, if I've offered my scope that other people can use.
Yeah.
And
so you want it seamlessly so that you can automatically use it for yourself. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. I mean that'd be on the server side. You'd have that control. You'd probably have your own customised panel. But the way the program's going is Paul, Dave, and I were in Bristol, and we were thinking of a new name, or thinking of a name for this program, and we come up with Astra. All scientific translation is relevant to astronomy. But we couldn't think of the right program to suit that name, but we found out this one does have that. Because I'm going through a book called Practical Astronomy in Your Calculator, and it explains all the mathematics of calculating things like position of a planet and being able to translate between different coordinate systems. And I'm thinking, in the end, you might end up having a scripting language, a kind of programming language built into the program, so that you could add your own functions, and all the functionality like you see there would actually be programs running under my system. And that would be an Astra, because we would also provide all the mathematical functions for astronomy as well. So that's the way we want to take it. But apart from that, that's about it really.
Haven't any farmers approached you for keeping an eye on their sheep, for rustlers or something? Same application.
Not yet, I'm expecting that though.
It's pretty viable, isn't it? One of those parked on top of a Priscilli mountains.
What you want to do is use your system you invented for that hospital.
Oh yeah. There is something interesting that came to my mind about that. Some software that's come out now. I'm going to put it outside my flat, and apparently the webcam will take an image of what's outside of your street, or which could be the same as what's up there in space. And if it recognises that the image has changed, like somebody walking past, then it will activate. Do you think you could ever incorporate something like that into your software?
I already do that to make sure nobody pinches stuff out of my scores. I think the bottom line though with this is that at the moment there are several versions of this program in existence already, but at the bottom line right now is that it is possible for somebody on the light side of the earth and somebody on the dark side of the earth to go into partnership right now, and the person on the light side of the earth can use over the internet the telescope on the dark side of the earth. We did the original tests using Yahoo Messenger. Now Yahoo Messenger has got the advantage of being able to stream video, and it will be on a screen, and a stream like that. A screen like that, so you can be looking at the moon or whatever, driving it around, observing whatever you want. Also, you could be communicating either with voice or with text with the operator of the owner of the telescope. So the person who's using it on the other side of the world can already do this, and that's the basis of the test that we've already done. So it's not an airy-fairy thing, it's something that exists right now. And if it was never to go any further than it does now, it's a usable operating system for doing remote control of a telescope and of getting data from it.
I think that's possibly the most important thing about it, is that you can set your telescope on a really cold, frosty night. You can retire back to a warmer room somewhere. Maybe a room that's got a view of where the telescope is, so you can see everything's going on. You can sit in the comfort of a room and with a better computer operator, and then you can do quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
We've actually done that, and it's good.
What's happened there? I clicked on more and just kept going. Well, that is a problem with me. I would suggest it's possibly a connection problem with the plug, with the handset.
Can I have a question? Last year I had a go on that, okay, and I operated it from my laptop in Swansea, okay, and it was working perfectly well. Okay. So why have there been all these modifications?
Because the problem is when the network is stressed, okay, which we found when we were streaming live video through NetMeeting, NTC sends a request, the client sends a request to the server saying move the telescope, and then when he doesn't get a response from the telescope, because the network has just squashed the packet out of existence, so it never gets back to the client. So the client then doesn't know when to say to stop, okay? Which means that the telescope is going to keep slowing, and it's never going to stop. And it'll keep going until it gets damaged, it's wrecked, which meant that was the problem.
Why don't we send individual moves instead?
Say again?
Why don't we send multiple steps instead, so that it appears to be slowing?
Well, this is what this is doing. We're doing it in steps. We're doing it, telling it to go in steps of on offset. Because Dave also, he basically got carried away and put it onto the fastest snooze speed and just jammed it down. Luckily the telescope's okay. I mean, maybe that's what damaged it, I don't know. But he was like jammed all the way down. I just looked out the caravan, I couldn't believe what he did. And Dave was like supposed to be a sort of experienced astronomer. But I did say as slow as possible. I think he just got a bit impatient, I don't know. You know, Dave.
Yes, I think you probably just turned it onto fast instead of slow. But yeah, that's the reason. As I said, we did these tests a year ago, more than a year ago. So we know it works. It's a case of getting it to work exactly right, as well as eventually putting in features that Andrew's interested in as well, that I'm much less interested in. I'm much more interested in personal partnership between somebody on the dark side of the earth and somebody on the light side of the earth, and working on a one-to-one basis rather than on a whole network of telescopes potentially being available. But that might take off, it might not. But we do know that the personal partnership will work. And so that it's got a lot of potential over and above what we're currently able to do with it. And really the software's in a sort of beta testing stage where it's possible to take it and use it and try it out and to provide feedback. we've got these new functions in there that Andrew's currently working on, such as the search function, which, as he says, will potentially facilitate the finding of an object when you can't actually see it as you put the camera into the eyepiece slot.
What standard of kit do you need in your telescope mount to interface with your computer?
Sorry, second?
What kit have you got in your telescope mount? Is it perfectly standard go-to?
Yes, it's all inclusive. So you can get one of these now with the tripod, with an AutoStar controller and telescope for £479. Well, I paid £600 for the telescope alone. I had to buy the tripod, and the AutoStar cost £130 as well. So for £479 you get the whole lot. I've also got an automatic focuser on the back, well, an electronic focuser on the back, which you can control with my software as well. We can't demonstrate that because there's nothing looking through the telescope, we're just using the camera on top. And that works quite well. The sad thing is there's only 2 speeds or something, and the slowest speed isn't quite slow enough. So you have to just sort of tap it, gradual steps. But 479 is a good deal. I mean, they are good telescopes.
Yeah, the equipment is off the shelf as well. And indeed, as we said, the initial tests are for software being off the shelf, as it were. That's free software like the Yahoo communicating messenger program, and also NetMeeting. But it's not the ultimate aim to be using these off-the-shelf software. The ultimate aim is to do all of it, the video streaming, as Andrew explained, via NTC itself. But the first thing is to get the movements and the searching functions and so on right. But it's all completely off the shelf. It's all the lowest specification computer we get our hands on, which is an old 486 laptop, and we put into that a network card, and that works perfectly with it. So we're talking about network cards that you can buy off the shelf, whether they're wireless. We've done it with wireless network cards, wired network cards. We've transmitted the video through cables and wirelessly. And what does it cost to buy a wireless transmitter so you can put a video camera in there?
I paid £69, but you can get for about 40, 30.
Yeah, so talk about that sort of price. Let's ballpark figure less than 50 quid. You can buy a transmitter that you'll plug into your video camera, which is stuck on the back of your telescope, and you'll also get a receiver.
Yeah, these
that will receive the signals. There they are. They're just off the shelf. Everything's off the shelf, and it's all really low cost. We can plug into that a video camera as good and as sensitive as we like. Some of the video cameras that we use here have got integrating modes where the image that they present on the screen is the result of summing together 128 frames, and so that you can actually see deep sky objects in real time. Now, with a telescope of that size, deep sky is going to be very problematical because it's a very low light burst. But with a telescope like Keith's telescope, which uses the same protocols which Andrew's program will control, that we would be able to put a real-time video camera on the back and actually look at our deep sky objects, our globular clusters and galaxies and nebulae and so on in real time, with something like a 1 to 2 second delay between the refresh for each new frame, which is virtually as good as a continuous image. We'll be able to do that with a bigger telescope, but a scope like this is absolutely ideal for looking at things like the sun, the moon. So yes, the other potential, which of course I didn't say, is that it's possible for somebody on the dark side of the Earth to look at the sun on the light side.
Could also be used in cases like solar eclipses, where one area is
yes,
unlucky, can't see it because of bad weather, and just a few miles away, you've got good weather.
I'm thinking
you worked in
also-
with somebody.
I'm also looking into the possibility, I don't know how it's going to work or whether it will work, but multicasting, that's a new thing on the internet now. One cast can be sent across to many people, multicasting, casting, yeah. It's a new thing, but I think it means like with Yahoo Messenger, for example, we can have a lot of people can be looking at the same image. So like Fred was just saying, a solar eclipse means a lot of people can see it, not just the one person who's controlling the scope.
Yes, that's right. The way it works now, you could have 2 or 3 people logged onto Yahoo Messenger, everybody looking at the image, and one of them controlling the telescope.
Does it matter to the server whether an Altaz or
At the moment there is a setting for Altaz and equatorial, but it doesn't matter because the program uses right ascension equatorial coordinates anyway, simply because this thing doesn't respond to Altaz anyway. So everything is done through right ascension explanation. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, because one thing about it, if you're going to use, if your computer's in your own right, obviously in Altaz, which I would be in my school, your tracking would go out over a period of time. Whereas a polar line telescope will not, it will be on it all night.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But, I mean, it's the controller doesn't track it anyway, the system doesn't worry about it.
No, but the telescope is going to slow down. It's going to go out of the eyepiece and therefore of the video over a few hours.
You can't just go back.
Well, not if you're not there doing it. If you're just leaving it run all night and they're operating it, you've got no.
What's going to happen is, I don't think tracking comes into it really, because I mean with this software all you're going to do is just going up, down, left and right. And it doesn't really matter where it's organised, how, what coordinate system it's using. It's just going to go right, left, up or down.
Yeah,
If they saw it moving out and
yeah, but
looking at the video, they'd
over a
pull it back.
10-hour period or an 8-hour period, it is going to shift.
Oh, the image will turn round, but even if it's Altaz, it should stay
towards
Altaz.
either side of the eyepiece or out.
Well, I've
But if
never
it
used
does move,
Altaz,
they'll
but
be able to
surely
pull it back.
that's built in, isn't it? I thought that as it was approaching the meridian, it steps up slightly.
On
Yeah.
Altaz, I've got to redo my 2-star alignment. See, polar alignment, it doesn't matter. Once you've done that 1-star line at the start, it'll track all night. But it won't in Altaz.
Weird, didn't know that.
Just thought I'd bring it up.
Does anybody else use Altaz?
Yeah, we do.
I thought when you were, if an object was approaching the meridian, it was stepping up in declination, and if it was going away from the meridian, it was stepping down. I thought that was built into it, where it was looking. It is. I thought that was. So where is the problem? The only problem I can see is that the angle of the scope is going like that normally in equatorial, but this time it isn't. It's going that
Well,
way.
it is
So you
eventually
get a
going to,
change of
it's
image.
just left unchecked, eventually it's going to go down to the horizon, isn't it? That's when you need to sort of move it back across. If you just leave it tracking the stars,
I
it's eventually going to
thought
go.
the STARS program took.
Well, I mean,
control
if
of
you
it.
just leave it on the star or a planet,
Yeah.
it's just going to keep going. Eventually, it will eventually go below the horizon, so the auto starts on to stop tracking. Is that what you're on about? You just leave
No,
it?
I don't know. Is that what you were on
No.
about?
Yeah,
No. Well, no. What happens then is AutoStar will tell you it's below the horizon. It will stop.
Yeah, it'll stop. Yeah.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Altaz is not as good as polar
Oh, of course it
at
is.
tracking.
Oh, it is. It depends on what you compare to.
Well, unless you do a very accurate Altaz alignment.
Well, how long are you going to take exposures for? Well,
No, I mean, if somebody's coming in at 4 o'clock in the morning, our time, and they're going to have an hour or two on it, you know, I don't know.
Ours tracks fine.
Well, Altaz is used on many a modern scope now, on the bigger scopes. And they don't complain about it. It works all right.
I think Andrew's answer to this anyway was that, I mean, obviously, the better the tracking that you've got on whatever system, the nicer it will be. But if the tracking isn't perfect, and if you find that your object is drifting out of the field of view, the whole object of this program is that you can you can move it, you can control the telescope. So it's just like sitting there and saying, oh, well, this is not tracking very well, I'm going to make some adjustments and bring it back in. That's exactly what you would do with this. So if you're making an observation, you'll be able to pull the object back into the field of view and look at the part
The
that you
trick
want
then
it to.
was to relock the sync on the tracking of the scope, so you need to have a different level of access to it. And say, right, I'm allowed to adjust the tracking accuracy of this scope. Like this
In
is
tracking, there is tracking, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, you don't want everybody to say, that's my object. I
Oh
need
no,
to
just
track
really
it.
what the server will be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing I can say in support of Keith was, you know, I might be observing something for half an hour, and how's tracking is fine, but it says quite clearly in the manual that for long-term astrophotography you should have a phone out.
Yeah, that's because the image is
Well, the
turning
image
round.
rotates, you see, in an altazimuth. If you took a long exposure, and we don't take long exposure anyway, even our long exposures, we're talking about a minute. So that's a long exposure to us with the electronic devices. But if you were taking a classical photography long exposure, what you would find with an altazimuth mount is that the image would actually rotate, and your stars would be rotated. So that doesn't happen with a polar alignment, but it's of minimal importance if you're doing medium, low length exposures. The only thing is that you can't take huge numbers of them and then stack them, because the rotation becomes significant over a relatively short period of time. But each image itself is a perfectly valid image. But there is the problem of
But I suppose the
rotation.
client will know what mount you've got, either polar or altaz, or will he not?
That's about it, really. Be a good time for a coffee break or something.